Okay, my name is Devyn Taylor, and the topic of my project is Transracial Adoption Conversations, acronym TRAC, coaching model, engaging caregivers adopting or fostering transracially in conversations on race over the lifespan. So a little bit about me. I've worked for Alameda County in California, Children and Family Services for 16 years. The last 6 years, I've been a supervisor in the adoption program. And my job entails supervising children's and adoption permanency workers. That's a picture of my daughter and I. Okay, so I first became interested in this topic when multiple workers in my unit told me that when discussing transracial placements with caregivers, no one ever talked with us about this. This was concerning to me because oftentimes when the adoption worker gets the case, the child's been in the home anywhere from 6 to 18 months. And so the idea that the adoption worker is the first person to bring up that there is a transracial placement and racial needs is concerning, especially considering that transracial adoptions continue to grow in California with 29% of all adoptions, as well as in Alameda County, where almost half of all of the adoptions are transracial. Staff in Alameda County are not specifically trained or coached on how to discuss race or racial identity with caregivers that are not of the same race or culture of a child. And as I said, by the time an adoption worker is supporting the family, other agency staff should have had numerous conversations with the family. So based on this, my research question was, if child welfare and adoption staff participating in a Pact training on transracial adoption, adoptees' experiences, and anti-racist service provision also attend a developed coaching model that includes simulations, vignettes, guidelines for coaching of parents around topics related to transracial adoption, including racial and cultural identity, will it improve their comfort and skills in discussing race and racial identity with caregivers? So in doing a literature review, I read multiple books and listened to podcasts by adults who were adopted transracially to understand their lived experiences. But the foundation of the coaching model was based on the research and articles by Elizabeth Vonk. The key takeaways from the literature were: 1, children need a positive racial identity. 2, parents who adopt transracially need to increase awareness in 3 key areas, being racial awareness, multicultural planning, and survival skills. And the last takeaway was there's a need for ongoing training with caregivers. Much of the training for caregivers on cultural competency and transracial placements happens when caregivers are getting licensed to become caregivers and foster parents. However, there's really not anything in place for once a child is placed in the home. So the intervention and methodology. First, I collected background data on staff's current comfort levels in practice. Next, I partnered with a local agency, Pact, an adoption alliance that works specifically with children of color and transracial adoptees and parents to provide training to staff on issues related to transracial adoption. And then lastly, based on the literature review and my experience in the adoption program, I developed the second part of the training and of my PICO, which is the TRAC 5-module coaching model. I created 2 models. So one was for child welfare workers and the other was for management that included supervisors and program managers. And again, the aim of the coaching model was to increase staff's comfort and skills in discussing race and ethnicity with clients and staff. So in order to understand kind of where all of the staff was, I wanted to see how comfortable staff were discussing concerns in homes regarding race, culture, and ethnicity. So this data table you can see on the top row shows that most people reported that they were either very comfortable or comfortable talking with parents about concerns in the home regarding race and culture. However, only 55% marked that they had actually had conversations with caregivers. So this just got me thinking, what is keeping staff from having these conversations? Are they really as comfortable as they say they are, or do they feel like there's a deficit in the skill to discuss these issues? So the training consisted of 2 parts. So the first was the Pact training, And I'll explain a little more about that later. But really, the content was on the importance of racial identity in anti-racist work. And that training was given virtually. The second part was the TRAC coaching model that I developed, which was 5 sessions, one a week over about 2.5 months. And again, it was based on 5 developmental stages, engaging caregivers and children in conversations about transracial parenting, children's racial identity needs. And there were 2 groups. There was the child welfare worker group. All of those sessions were in person, and there was a management group that most sessions were in person except for most sessions were virtual. The last session was in person. As far as the participants, the Pact training was open to child welfare workers, child welfare supervisors, program managers, and division directors in the adoption program, RFA program, which is the resource family approval, which is the home approving unit, dependency investigation, which is the court unit after a child's been placed in custody, and the SEED unit, which is a specialized FR adoption unit that focuses on children under 5. And of those, 67 staff members participated in the Pact training. So for the second part, the coaching model, that was offered to child welfare workers, child welfare supervisors, and program managers in the adoption program, RFA program, and SEED program who participated in the Pact training. So of those, we had 10 child welfare workers volunteer to participate, and 7 management, included 5 supervisors and 2 program managers. So part 1 was the Pact training, which was conducted by Beth Hall, who's the executive director from Pact. It consisted of 2 parts. The first was a panel discussion with 3 adults who were adopted transracially. And the second part was given by Beth Hall, and it was on how to provide anti-racist service provision and meet children's racial identity needs. And the anti-racist service provision aimed to teach staff how to have difficult and frequent conversations with caregivers, how staff can examine their own privilege, how to advocate for children of color, and essentially how to be the opposite of racist. The training also addressed the impact that lack of conversations on race have on racial identity, self-esteem, and relationships in the family. So the results of the pre and post-test indicated a strong increase in information, tools, understanding of transracial issues with staff. As you can see, the post numbers were, in the high 70s to 100%. The pre-survey showed that, for example, I have the tools I need to support transracial adoptees was 26% before the Pact training. After the Pact training, 79% of staff felt that they agreed or strongly agreed that that statement was true. Another example, before the Pact training, zero staff reported that they agreed or strongly agreed that they had the tools, suggestions, that they needed to assess whether pre-adoptive parents should adopt transracially. After the training, that was more than half. And similarly with the other ones, staff really took a lot away from the Pact training. Specifically, staff reported being strongly impacted by the panel of adult adoptees and hearing about the experiences in homes where race was openly discussed versus it was not. So part 2 was the TRAC coaching model. Again, it consisted of 5 module sessions, each focused on a different developmental stage. So these were the different stages from infancy to middle adolescence, and they included case management specific content. So each model was designed, there was one for the child welfare workers that worked with them on how to address issues directly with the caregivers or with children. And the management module focused on how to address issues with staff, so with child welfare workers. Each session included a vignette example of case management issues related to race. And each session included a discussion of highlighted key concepts such as identity development and formation, racial mirrors, racial awareness, colorism, multicultural planning. There were critical thinking questions to get staff thinking about what are the concerns in the scenario or in the vignette, and how could you address them with the caregiver. And there was also a section that taught desired behavioral change. For example, desired behavior we want to see from caregivers would be purchasing dolls and books that reflect the child's birth culture. My agency also graciously purchased a variety of books and dolls to help staff and families, which was great. Other desired behavioral changes were locating professionals of the child's race, providing real life connection to the child's birth culture, and questioning media images. So in addition to all of this information, I also listed books, videos, TV shows, movies, and podcasts that could be used to incorporate this information or to facilitate these conversations. So in delivery of the coaching model, I partnered with our two agency coaches to facilitate the sessions. I met with them regularly to discuss how to facilitate and how to bring up the conversations, how to dig deeper, and then also met with them afterwards to kind of debrief and see what could be better. So the modules included group discussions, videos, sample scenarios, articles, activities. I tried to have an interactive component for each session. So there was a marble activity on diversity in the network for one session. I played a clip of the TV show This Is Us to facilitate a discussion of sibling relationships and conflict regarding transracial placements and adoption. In another session, I showed a video by Dr. Joseph Crumbly demonstrating how to talk to older children about transracial placements and get their input. And as I said, coaching sessions were 5 sessions for management and 5 sessions for child welfare workers. So an example of one of the vignettes this is for early adolescence. The situation is 12-year-old foster daughter Carrie, who is African-American, is in a home with a white caregiver, a 50-year-old single woman named Megan. Megan also has a 16-year-old biological daughter. The scenario is Megan talks to her child welfare worker about Carrie kind of change in behavior. She's spending time with new friends. The new friends are Black. She's not spending time with her previous friends who were white. The caregiver, Megan, tells the worker that she thinks the new girls may be a bad influence because Carrie does not invite them over to the home. So initially, we'd identify important concepts in this vignette, such as racial identity and racial pride. We would also discuss microaggressions and prejudice. And then critical thinking questions would be asking the workers, what would you say or do in this scenario? Do you think it's age appropriate for a 12-year-old child to explore her identity and develop new friendships? How can you engage the caregiver in a conversation about identity development and formation in the context of adoption? And how could you discuss the intersection of identity, adoption, and race with caregivers? So some desired behavior changes based on this vignette might include engaging the caregiver engaging the child in ongoing conversation about race, thinking critically about race, the caregiver and worker validating the child's feelings about race and racial identity, the caregiver questioning her own biases and thoughts. So that was an example. And then for each developmental stage, there was an example like this in further discussion. So after completing the model, staff completed an evaluation of their knowledge, skills, and comfort levels. As you can see from this one, this is from all of the participants. There was a large increase in staff who felt that their knowledge increased after participation in the coaching model. You can see that staff reported that before the coaching model, they felt in the teens and 20s that they had a lot of knowledge. However, after the coaching model, staff reported in the 80s and 90% that they had a lot of knowledge in these issues. Additionally, all of the child welfare workers agreed or strongly agreed that their comfort level in talking with families about transracial issues increased. And during the sessions, it was really interesting. Staff would try out things with their clients in between sessions and then come back to sessions and talk about, what went well, what landed wrong, what landed right, get suggestions. So it was really interactive and staff really got to try them out with the support of myself, the coaches, and the other participants. So it was really beneficial. Furthermore, management also overwhelmingly strongly agreed that their level of comfort in talking with staff increased. The management sessions also included how to address pushback from staff and ways to start conversations with staff. But you can see that following the TRAC coaching model, the managers, these are program managers and child welfare supervisors, felt that their level of comfort talking to staff increased. So that was really great to see as well. And then lastly, workers reported an increase in their skill level and abilities in how to discuss topics related to race, culture, and ethnicity with caregivers. You can see from the chart that 67% of workers reported that their skill level increased quite a bit to a great extent. So the answer to my PICO is yes. As a result of training and coaching model, staff increased their comfort and skills in discussing race and racial identity with caregivers. Additionally, some of the feedback that I received was that staff wished the training was mandatory for all staff. This session was offered to, as I said, adoption, RFA, and SEED staff, but they felt like throughout the agency, it should really be mandatory. And they also hoped that the agency would continue to offer the training to reinforce the learning. So in the 1 to 3 month follow-up, data indicated that the respondents attended 33% of child welfare workers and 40% of supervisors attended 4 or more coaching sessions. That number was a little low. These are based on the respondents again. In actuality, 80% of child welfare workers attended 4 or more sessions. So that was great. There was a lot of buy-in. On the last session, we even had someone call in from vacation because they wanted to participate and they really found it valuable. So that was great. Additionally, 100% of respondents used the information they learned during the TRAC coaching, and 100% of the child welfare workers strongly agreed that they provided better support to families because they participated in the TRAC coaching model. So some of the challenges and limitations, the first 2 kind of go hand in hand. Staff participation was voluntary, and many of the staff that had participated had already started having conversations on race with staff and with resource parents. So essentially we were kind of preaching to the choir. If people voluntarily participated, it was because they valued this conversation, they thought it was important, and they wanted to increase their skill and comfort level in having these conversations. I would joke with the coaches that the child welfare group was kind of like the AP class. Like if you couldn't just come with basic, they wanted to delve in deeper. They wanted to like really talk about the issues. So it was really, really, really nice to be in a group of people who really want to do this work. The last limitation was that the results were based on staff's reports only. Resource parents and staff experiences were not gathered. So the information may have been biased or inaccurate due to the self-reporting. Lessons learned. So the first lesson was that staff are ready and eager for these conversations. In the initial child welfare worker group, we had planned for the sessions to be 90 minutes. And in the first session, they asked for it to be expanded to 2 hours because they really didn't feel like 90 minutes was enough time to dig deep. So that was great. And it just showed me that people are ready to have these conversations. They've been wanting to have these conversations and really had no outlet. So that was the first lesson. The second is that it's extremely time consuming to develop and implement a new training. I understand why we have a training department. It's a lot of work. And so that was definitely eye-opening. And the last lesson learned really just reinforced my belief that it's negligent to ignore a child's racial identity. It's important and it matters, and to not acknowledge it is really doing a disservice to the child and to the caregivers. So next steps, I'm planning to share the results of my project with my agency during a senior management meeting. My program plans to continue to partner with Pact for additional trainings in the future. And my hope is that my agency will continue to implement the coaching model in the agency and just increase everyone's comfort. And then I personally would also like to continue to help staff increase their comfort in talking about race with caregivers. MPLD impact. So this fellowship has had a really big impact on me. Personally, I've increased my self-esteem and my self-confidence. I hadn't necessarily thought of myself as a leader previously before this fellowship, but let alone a transformational leader, but it really challenged me to be vulnerable and open with staff in a way that I hadn't been before. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. It also renewed my passion for social work and advocating for children. Working for the county for 16 years, it's really easy to get complacent with just doing your job and not really doing anything more. So this really gave me an opportunity to renew my passion and remember, this is why I got into social work. This is what I like to do. And then professionally, I became more vocal and active in my agency, which I had not done prior to this fellowship. And I also learned that I have more to offer in my position. My experience and my ideas are valuable and important, and I'm really grateful to my agency for acknowledging that and encouraging me to just run with it. So these are my references. And thank you.